It'd come home every evening to the same quiet rhythm. Keys dropped on the hook by the door, the faint clink echoing through our little hallway like it always did. Dinner warming on the stove, something simple and familiar, the steam carrying that faint garlic and herb scent that had become our unspoken signal the day was ending. Sarah moved through the kitchen in her faded gray shirt and those soft yoga pants that hugged her just enough to remind me of the woman I married 12 years ago. The vanilla scent of her lotion still hung in the air, light and sweet, clinging to the curtains, the counters, even the edges of my memory. It was the same scent that used to make me pull her close after a long day, but now it just drifted. Unnoticed, like so many other things between us, we'd eat at the table, forks scraping plates in comfortable silence broken only by talk of work deadlines, the neighbor's dog barking again, or whether we needed milk for tomorrow. Then the couch, some show flickering on the screen, her head eventually drifting to my shoulder before we both headed to bed. Separate sides, the sheet school between us, nothing broken, just routine, comfortable. Safe, 12 years of it, layered like sediment. Each day pressing the last one a little deeper until the heat underneath felt distant, almost forgotten. I told myself it was normal. That the fire we once had didn't need to burn every night to still be there. Until last Tuesday, I remember the exact moment the air shifted. Sarah had stepped into the shower. I'd stepped into the shower, the water hissing on behind the closed bathroom door, steam already slipping out like a secret it couldn't quite hold. Her phone sat face up on the kitchen counter, glowing innocently beside the half-chopped vegetables. I wasn't snooping. Not really, just glancing, the way any husband might when the screen lit up with her best friend's name. The preview line stopped me cold. He still doesn't see how badly I burn for him. My thumb moved before my brain caught up. Sliding across the glass, I opened the thread. Page after page unfolded, her words pouring out in that raw, trembling way she never spoke aloud anymore. Confessions that made my stomach tighten. Fantasies she whispered to the screen when I was right there in the next room, breathing the same air, sleeping in the same bed. She wrote about needing me, about the ache that built every time I walked past her in the hallway, about how her body responded even when her voice stayed steady and polite. Line after line of her hunger laid bare. How she watched me from across the room and felt that pull, that gravity she couldn't fight. How she lay awake beside me some nights, heart racing, imagining my hands where they hadn't been in too long. How the routine had become a kind of exquisite torture because I was so close and yet so far. My own wife. Right here in our shared house. Suddenly a stranger on fire. The phone felt too warm in my hand. I set it down fast, but the words were already burned behind my eyes, searing into places I thought had gone quiet years ago. She thinks I never notice, God. I never did. My pulse hammered in my ears, loud enough to drown out the shower for a second. The vanilla scent on her phone case mixed with the steam drifting from the bathroom. Thick and sweet and suddenly overwhelming. For the first time in years, I felt the heat low in my gut, heavy and insistent, pulling at me like gravity had forgotten existed. My skin prickled, my breath caught somewhere between my ribs. I wanted her. Right then, with the water still running and her unaware, humming something soft under the spray. The sound of her voice, muffled and light, floated out and twisted something inside me. It was the same hum she used when she was content, but now every note carried the echo of those texts, the ones where she confessed how even that everyday sound made her crave more. The hesitation crashed and almost immediately, cold and metallic against that growing warmth, it invaded her privacy. Red words meant for no one, least of all me. What kind of husband does that? What kind of man turns his wife's hidden fire into something he can't unsee? Spun with the guilt, the shame of it, but my body didn't care, it remembered. It woke up, the conflict tore at me, one half screaming to put the phone back exactly as I found it, to erase the knowledge before it changed everything. The other half was already leaning toward the bathroom door, drawn by the steam and the scent and the unbearable image of her standing there, skin flushed from the heat, thinking thoughts she believed were invisible. I stood there frozen by the counter, hands gripping the edge until my knuckles whitened. The steam kept curling out, carrying faint traces of her shampoo, that clean citrus she liked. It wrapped around me, teasing, making it impossible to step away. Sarah, my Sarah, the woman who folded my shirts without complaint, who laughed at my bad jokes even when they weren't funny anymore. She'd been burning for me all this time, right under the surface of our careful routine, and I had walked past it every single day like a blind man. How many mornings had she poured my coffee with that same soft smile while inside she was drowning in want? How many evenings had her knee brushed mine on the couch and Shed felt electricity I never registered? The moral weight pressed down harder, whispering that I should delete the thread, pretend I never saw, go back to the safety of our separate sides of the bed. But the bodily awareness was stronger. It hummed under my skin, electric and unforgiving. I could almost feel her texts echoing in my veins, each word a spark against the quiet I'd grown used to. I wanted to push open that bathroom door, step into the steam, see if the heat in her words matched the heat in her eyes when she looked at me. But I didn't. I cowled. Not yet. Instead, I backed away, heart slamming against my ribs, the ache settling deep and restless. The shower shut off. I heard her moving behind the door, towel rustling, that soft sigh she always made when the water was just right. My hands trembled as I picked up the knife and finished chopping the vegetables, pretending nothing had changed. But everything had. The vanilla scent felt heavier now. The kitchen lights seemed to bright. Every small sound from the bathroom pulled at me. The click of her lotion bottle, the soft pad of her bare feet on the tile. She stepped out a few minutes later, hair damp and curling at the ends, wearing that same faded gray shirt that suddenly looked different. It clung in places it never had before. Her cheeks were flushed from the heat, eyes brightened innocent as she smiled at me across the counter. "Dinner almost ready?" she asked. Voice light, the same as always. I nodded, swallowing hard. The words from her phone flashed again uninvited. How badly she burned, how she needed. Yeah, I managed, my voice rougher than I wanted. Almost. She moved closer to help set the table, her arm brushing mine as she reached for the plates. Just a casual touch. But my skin ignited where we connected, brief and warm through the thin fabric. I didn't pull away, cowled. The hesitation warred inside me, screaming that this was wrong, that I should confess what I'd done, that I should stop seeing her like this. But the hunger was louder. It whispered that maybe, just maybe, she wanted me to notice. That the fire in her texts wasn't meant to stay hidden forever. We ate like always, talked about work, laughed at something small on the TV later. But when we climbed into bed that night, the space between us felt charged, alive with everything unsaid. She turned onto her side, back to me, the curve of her shoulder rising and falling with each breath. I lay there staring at the ceiling, pulse still uneven, the vanilla scent of her lotion wrapping around me like an invitation I wasn't supposed to have read. She thinks I never notice. My hand twitched under the sheets, inches from where hers rested, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin, not touching, not yet, but the almost was already unbearable. And I knew, deep down where the shame and the craving tangled together, that I wouldn't be able to pretend much longer. But the words stayed burned behind my eyes, making every ordinary glance at her feel like standing too close to a flame. I watched her pour coffee, the way her fingers wrapped around the mug, and remembered lines Shed written about wanting those same fingers elsewhere. Heat flooded me again and widened. Shame followed right behind, tight in my chest. How long had she been carrying this? How many nights had she lain beside me, burning quietly while I slept through it all? The question ached worse than the desire. I wanted to ask her. I wanted to tell her I knew, but the words stuck, heavy and forbidden. Instead, I kissed her cheek before leaving for work, lingering a second longer than usual. Her skin was soft, warm from sleep. She smiled up at me, none the wiser. Or maybe she was. The thought sent another jolt through me as I closed the door behind me, the house quiet once more. But the fire she thought I'd never see, it had already started to catch inside me too. I spent the whole day at work replaying fragments of those messages, each one hitting harder than the last. The way she described the quiet moments when our eyes met across the room, the sudden rush of heat she felt when I reached past her for something in the fridge, how Shed bit her lip to keep from saying anything out loud while I sat oblivious on the couch. My chest tightened every time I thought about it. She was right there, Every single evening, moving through our life with that gentle grace, and I had missed the storm building beneath her calm surface. Sharp and relentless, I had no right to those words. They were hers, private, poured out in the dark when she thought no one would ever know. Yet now they lived in me, impossible to shake. By the time I turned the key in the lock that evening, the house smelled of roasted chicken and herbs again, the familiar rhythm trying to wrap around me like a blanket. Sarah was at the stove stirring something, her back to me in that same Grady shirt. The fabric shifted as she moved, and for a split second I saw the outline of her shoulder blades, the gentle curve where her waist met her hips. Hanging my keys with a little too much force. "Hey, you're home," she said, turning with that soft smile that used to feel ordinary. Now it felt like a secret she didn't know she was sharing. Her hair was pulled up loosely, a few strands escaping to brush her neck. The vanilla scent drifted toward me as she stepped closer to greet me with a quick kiss on the cheek. I lingered there longer than I meant to, inhaling her, feeling the warmth of her skin so close. She pulled back, eyes searching mine for a moment, but I looked away, afraid she'd see the change. Dinner passed in the usual way, plates clinking, conversation light and safe. But underneath the table my niece stayed a fraction closer to hers, not touching, just near enough that I could feel the heat radiating through the space between us. Every time she reached for the salt or the water glass, her arm came within inches of mine. The air felt thicker, charged with something electric that made my pulse quicken. I kept thinking about her words. How badly she burned for me, how she ached when I was right beside her and still somehow distant. The shame twisted in my gut again. I shouldn't know this. I shouldn't be letting it affect me like this. But God, the pull was there, magnetic and unforgiving. After we cleared the table, she disappeared into the bathroom again for her evening routine. I stood at the sink, rinsing plates, listening to the water run. The steam carried that citrus shampoo sent out to me once more, mixing with the vanilla that seemed to cling to everything she touched. My hands slowed. I closed my eyes and let the memory of her texts wash over me. The way she described lying awake, heart pounding, wanting me to turn toward her in the dark, wanting me to see her, really see her. The ache in my own body answered, low and deep. A hunger I thought had faded with the years. I dried my hands slowly, the towel rough against my skin. The moral war raged inside me again. This is Sarah, my wife, the woman I promised to cherish in the ordinary days as much as the passionate ones. Reading her private thoughts was a betrayal. Letting it stir this fire in me felt like another. Yet the rational part of me whispered back that maybe she had left the phone there on purpose. Maybe some part of her hoped I would finally notice. The thought sent a shiver through me, equal parts guilt and craving. When she came out, haired up again, wearing an oversized shirt that slipped off one shoulder, I had to grip the counter to keep from reaching for her. The exposed skin there looked so soft, so warm. She moved past me toward the living room, her arm brushing mine in the narrow space. That single point of contact sent heat tracing up my arm straight to my chest. She didn't seem to notice, or if she did, she hid it behind another gentle smile. We settled on the couch for our show, the same one we'd watched 100 times. Her head found my shoulder eventually, just like always. But tonight the weight of it felt different, heavier with meaning. Her breathing was steady, calm, but I could feel the faint tremor in my own body as I fought the urge to turn my face into her hair, to breathe her in deeper. The text echoed, how she fantasized about my hands sliding under the fabric, about the closeness she craved when everything else felt routine. My fingers twitched against my thigh, inches from where her hand rested on the cushion between us, the almost moment stretched, unbearable. 2. Close enough that the warmth from her skin reached mine through the air. I didn't move. She didn't move. The show played on, laughter from the screen filling the room, but all I could hear was the pounding in my ears and the silent confession burning between us. She thinks I never notice, but I did now. But tonight everything carried a different weight, as if the air itself had thickened since yesterday. Sarah had dinner waiting, nothing fancy. Just pasta with fresh herbs and a salad catching the light in a way that felt too ordinary for the storm brewing underneath. I sat across from her at our usual table, and almost immediately her knee found mine beneath the thin tablecloth. It stayed there, warm and deliberate, pressing lightly through the fabric of my jeans in a way that sent a slow heat spreading up my leg. I didn't pull away. My breath hitched just for a second, and I reached for the salt at the exact moment she did. Our hands hovered inches apart over the cool glass, close enough that I could feel the faint warmth radiating from her skin without any actual contact. The space between us felt alive, humming with something I couldn't name, pulling at me like an invisible current. Those secret words of hers kept echoing. The way she had written about craving my hands right there, steady and sure, shame twisted sharp in my gut. My wife, the woman who had shared 12 quiet years of mornings and evenings with me. How could one small brush of knees suddenly make the familiar feel so dangerous? She leaned forward a little to reach the pepper, and the soft cotton of her t-shirt stretched across her chest with the motion, rising and falling gently with each breath. I couldn't stop the memory of her text from flooding back, raw and trembling, describing the ache she carried even when I sat right beside her. My hand lingered near hers on the table, not touching, but near enough that the air between our fingers felt charged, magnetic, drawing me in despite every reason to resist. The room smelled of garlic and basil, warm and comforting, but underneath it all lingered that faint vanilla trace that always clung to her after her shower, subtle yet impossible to ignore. My pulse beat louder than the quiet scrape of forks on plates. I should have shifted my leg, broken the contact, kept us safe in the routine we both knew so well. But I didn't. The silence stretched between us, thick and trembling, every small reach for a napkin or glass bringing our arms dangerously close. She offered a soft smile, eyes on her plate, yet her knee remained pressed to mine, warm and unyielding, as if quietly testing the line we had both been walking for months without admitting it. The meal continued in that charged quiet, every ordinary motion now heavy with possibility. When she passed me the water glass, our fingers came within a breath of brushing, and I felt the heat of her skin like a promise suspended in the air. I kept thinking about how she had described the loneliness living right beside me in this house, the way her body yearned for closeness even when words failed. I shouldn't know these things. I shouldn't let them color the way I saw her now, turning a simple dinner into something that made my skin feel too tight, too aware. Yet the pull was there, steady and unforgiving, like gravity drawing to bodies closer no matter how hard they tried to stay apart. When she finally stood to clear the plates, her hand brushed the back of mine for the briefest instant, sending a spark racing up my arm that left me breathless, heart hammering against my ribs in the sudden quiet. After the table was cleared, I stood alone at the sink, hot water running over my hands in steady streams while steam curled up around my face. "This is Sarah," I told myself again and again, scrubbing the plates harder than necessary. My partner through every ordinary day, the one who knew exactly how I liked my coffee and the way I arranged the pillows at night. I shouldn't be looking at her through the lens of those private words she never meant for me to read. It felt like a betrayal, twisting the steady affection we had built into something sharper, hungrier, more dangerous than the life we had carefully woven together. The guilt clawed at my chest, making it hard to breathe, cold and metallic on my tongue. What kind of husband lets hidden thoughts reshape the way his body responds to his wife's simplest movements? The sponge slipped from my grip, splashing water across the counter, and for a moment I just stood there, gripping the edge of the sink. But then another voice rose inside me, quieter yet insistent, cutting through the shame like a lifeline. She had written every aching detail for a reason. The loneliness she poured out in those texts echoed in the spaces between our conversations. Maybe it could mend what the years of routine had slowly worn thin. I dried my hands slowly on the towel, the fabric rough against my damp skin, each motion deliberate as I fought the urge to turn away from the sink and walk straight back to her. I found her in the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch surrounded by piles of laundry, folding sheets into neat squares with that careful rhythm I had watched 1,000 times before. Without thinking, I picked up a corner of the fabric and joined her, drawn in by something I couldn't quite name or resist. The sheets carried the clean scent of the detergent she always chose, soft and comforting, yet now mixed with the subtle warmth of her presence so close beside me. Our hands worked in quiet sync, folding and smoothing, the motion almost hypnotic in its familiarity. Then she bent down to retrieve a fallen pillowcase from the floor. Her shirt rode up slightly in that innocent movement, revealing the gentle, soft curve of her waist, skin pale and warm in the lamplight. Something inside me pulled tight, a sudden coil of heat that made my fingers pause mid-fold. I stepped closer to help, hand reaching out, fingers brushing that exposed line of skin longer than necessary, lingering just enough to feel the smooth warmth beneath my calloused fingertips. The contact sent a jolt straight through me, undeniable and electric, traveling up my arm and settling low in my chest. She didn't flinch, didn't pull away or even shift. Her breath seemed to catch for half a second, or maybe I only imagined the way the air around us thickened, charged like the moments before a summer storm finally breaks. We kept folding, our shoulders now nearly touching with each pass of the fabric, every small exchange bringing us closer in the quiet room. When she handed me another sheet, our fingers grazed the edge of full contact before retreating, and I could feel the subtle rise and fall of her breathing, steadier than mine but deeper somehow, as if she'd sensed the shift happening between us. That vanilla scent wrapped around me again, mingling with the faint citrus from her recent shower, creating a heady mix that blurred the edges of my thoughts. My mind waged its silent war. This has to stop. It's crossing into territory we never named aloud, turning my wife into someone I crave in ways that scare me. She is the woman who has stood beside me through every ordinary storm, knowing my flaws and staying anyway. But the pull felt gravitational now, impossible to fight, as if those hidden X's had cracked open a door I thought was long sealed. Now every small proximity carried the weight of possibility, every brush of skin a question hanging unanswered in the air. She reached for the next pillowcase, her arm brushing against mine, and heat bloomed instantly where we touched, brief yet lingering like an echo that refused to fade. I didn't retreat. She didn't either. The loop of tension wound tighter, silent and breathless, leaving my heart hammering against my ribs as the ordinary chore transformed into something far more intimate. The following night, the dance continued during our evening chores, the laundry basket resting between us on the bed as we worked side by side once more. She laughed softly at something trivial on the TV in the background. The sound light and familiar, yet tonight it carried an undercurrent that made my chest ache with unspoken need. When she leaned across to grab a straight owl, her knee found its way against mine again, pressing with that same quiet insistence that made my pulse quicken. I remember how her words had painted this exact kind of craving, the deep, wordless ache for closeness that no conversation had managed to satisfy in recent years. My hand moved instinctively to steady the growing pile of folded linens, fingers lingering near the hem of her shirt where it had ridden up the night before. Soft skin haunted every motion, refusing to let me forget. She straightened slowly, her eyes meeting mine for a flickering second across the fabric, and nothing was spoken, but the space between our bodies felt smaller, heavier, loaded with all the almost moments we were collecting like precious, dangerous secrets. We continued working in that charged rhythm, the simple act of folding sheets, slowly transforming into something far more intimate than either of us would admit. Her breath brushed warm against my arm when she turned to pass another piece, carrying that subtle citrus hint that always followed her from the shower, making my thoughts blur at the edges. I fought the rising urge to lean in closer, to let my palm rest fully where it had only grazed before, to surrender to the heat building low and insistent in my body. Guilt flickered again, sharper this time, cutting through the haze like a warning. This feels wrong, using her most private confessions like kindling for a fire I shouldn't be stoking. We have built years of steady, ordinary love together. Why risk letting hidden words rewrite the safety of what we know so well? Yet the rationalization swept and swift and persuasive, like a tide I couldn't resist. She is lonely in the same way I have been, even here in this shared home. Those texts were her silent map to the hunger we both might have stopped reaching for long ago. Ignoring the signs now would be the deeper betrayal, letting the distance grow until neither of us could cross it anymore. Shangers brushed the curve of her waist again as I helped smooth a stubborn crease, the contact sending another warm wave coursing through me, stronger and more lingering than before. She paused in her movements, body going still for just a heartbeat, and the almost touch hung suspended between us, electric and unresolved, making the air feel too thick to breathe easily. The pile of sheets grew between us, white and crisp under the bedroom light, but my focus narrowed entirely to the way her skin had felt under that fleeting brush, so soft, so alive, drawing me in despite every rational voice screaming to pull back. She folded the final sheet, her hands moving slower now, almost hesitant, as if she'd have felt the weight of the moment. Our eyes met over the folded fabric, and for one suspended second the entire room narrowed to just that shared look, heavy with everything unsaid and everything beginning to stir. My heart hammered wildly against my ribs. She believes I have never truly noticed the depth of what she carries inside, the burning desire hidden behind gentle smiles and routine days. But I see it now, clearer with every passing hour, every lingering brush of skin. And with each small surrender to proximity, the ordinary fabric of our life feels poised on the edge of igniting into something brighter, more dangerous, more alive than before. The hesitation clawed even deeper afterward as I stood there watching her stack the neat piles of linens with careful hands. This path we were inching along could unravel the careful life we had woven if the tension spiraled any further, or perhaps it was the only way left to truly see each other again after years of quiet drift. The conflict twisted violently inside my chest, a storm of shame and raw craving that left wheat trembling beneath the surface. I wanted desperately to step back, to preserve the safety of the familiar routines that had carried us this far without question, but her unspoken hunger reached out to a part of me I had long buried under the weight of daily life, pulling me forward despite the fear. When she turned to carry the basket toward the closet, her shoulder grazed mine in the narrow space of the room, sending fresh sparks racing along my skin like hidden lightning in the dark. I didn't step aside. The gravity between us strengthened with every shared breath, undeniable and growing stronger by the moment. One more inch, one more lingering touch, and everything we thought we knew might shift irreversibly. She paused at the doorway for a moment, glancing back over her shoulder with that gentle smile that now seemed to hide oceans of feeling I had only just begun to understand. The air in the room felt thick, saturated with the weight of words neither of us had yet dared to speak aloud. My pulse raced, caught precariously on the sharp edge of revelation, every nerve alive with the knowledge that these small loops of proximity were only beginning to draw us tighter, closer, toward whatever came next. I stood frozen in the hallway afterward, my back pressed to the cool wall as if its solidness could somehow steady the chaos inside my chest. My heart slammed against my ribs so violently I wondered if she could hear it from the other room. What the hell am I doing? She's my wife, the woman I've shared 12 quiet years with. Not some secret fantasy I get to chase in stolen glances and half-touches. The guilt tasted metallic, sharp and bitter like blood on my tongue. But her text kept echoing through my mind, those raw late-night confessions where she described how her body responded when she thought of me, the way her fingers moved with my name on her lips in the dark. Ignoring that hunger now would be the real betrayal, letting the comfortable distance we both accepted swallow the last sparks between us. My feet betrayed me before my thoughts could catch up, carrying me toward the soft sound of her humming our old song, the one we used to play on long drives years ago, drawing me back, and like an invisible tide I couldn't resist. She was in the bedroom by the window, her hands gently folding a small piece of fabric, the late afternoon light filtering through the curtains and catching in the strands of her hair like scattered gold. I lingered in the doorway for a long moment, just watching the familiar sway of her shoulders, the quiet rhythm of her body moving to the melody. Something pulled me closer, an unseen gravity that made the space between us feel alive and dangerous. She glanced up then, her eyes meeting mine with that soft, familiar smile that had always made the ordinary feel safe. Hey, you okay?" Her voice carried that gentle concern she'd offered me 1,000 times before, warm and steady. I nodded, stepping further into the room even as every rational part of me screamed to keep distance, to preserve the careful balance we'd maintained for so long. Charged with words we hadn't spoken and feelings we hadn't named, I could smell the faint trace of her vanilla lotion still lingering from earlier, sweet and comforting yet stirring something restless deep in my chest. And she turned to me over breakfast with that hopeful look, asking if I could help set up a new spreadsheet for her side business. Just a way to organize orders and track expenses more clearly so things didn't slip through the cracks. We settled side by side at the dining table, our laptops placed so close their edges nearly touched, mirroring the way our bodies had been inching nearer lately without either of us acknowledging it. Every time she leaned forward to point at a column on the screen, her shoulder pressed lightly against mine, the contact brief but impossible to ignore. Warm and sweet like a memory I hadn't realized I was craving, I didn't shift away. Not even when her hair brushed across my arm as she reached for the mouse, the soft strands sending a sudden spark racing along my skin. Electric and undeniable. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, the room filled only with the quiet clicks of our keyboards and her occasional thoughtful hum. Her knee bumped against mine beneath the table once, lingering a heartbeat longer than accidental before she whispered a soft apology. But I sensed the hesitation in her voice, or maybe I was only imagining it because my own pulse had quickened at the warmth of that brief touch, drawing us into ever tighter circles of proximity that turned the simplest tasks into something fraught with unspoken tension. My eyes stayed fixed on the screen, but my awareness narrowed completely to the heat radiating from her body beside me, the subtle rhythm of her breathing that seemed to sync with my own without effort. She smelled like home, like safety, and yet like something more, something that awakened an ache I'd been carrying since those hidden messages first burned into my mind. My hand rested near hers on the wooden surface, only inches apart, close enough that I could feel the faint warmth rising from her skin. Neither of us closed the final gap, but the almost moment stretched between us, louder and more insistent than any actual contact could have been, leaving my throat dry and my thoughts tangled. When I found myself alone in the bathroom, I gripped the cool edge of the sink until my knuckles turned white, staring hard at my reflection as if it might hold some answer I hadn't yet found. This is crossing a line we can't uncross. We've built everything on the steady rhythm of routine, the shared meals, the quiet evenings, the comfortable silences that have carried us safely through more than a decade. Altering that foundation now could fracture the life we've carefully constructed, piece by careful piece. The morality war tore through me with fresh violence, shame burning hot against the rock raving that refused to loosen its hold. I splashed cold water across my face, watching it drip down my skin, but the storm inside only intensified. Then her words from those texts rose in Biden again, raw and trembling with desperation, the confessions where she admitted how deeply she needed to feel truly seen by me, how she lay awake with an emptiness that ordinary days couldn't fill. Sealing the decision like a whisper I cowled in silence, she has been burning silently for months, perhaps longer than either of us realized. Helping her feel that hunger acknowledged, helping us rediscover what we might have lost, felt like the only honest path remaining. I couldn't pretend blindness anymore. I walked out of the bathroom with the knowledge that I would seek her out again, sooner than wisdom allowed, the invisible thread around my chest already pulling tighter with every breath. The guilt didn't dissolve with distance. It coiled deeper as I moved through the house, each step feeling like I balanced on the edge of something delicate and irreplaceable. She stood in the kitchen rinsing a glass, her back turned to me in that simple. Now even the gentle line of her neck as she tilted her head slightly made my breath catch unexpectedly. I wanted nothing more than to retreat, to safeguard the familiar safety of our routines without inviting the risk of flames. Yet that awakened part of me, the one stirred awake by her secret words, kept urging me forward with quiet insistence. What if these small surrenders were exactly how we might find each other again after years of drifting side by side? The conflict left me trembling beneath my calm surface, a violent internal storm between the man who cherished our steady, trusted life and the one suddenly starving for the heat I had uncovered in her private confessions. I stayed hidden in the doorway a moment longer, observing her without making my presence known. The faint vanilla scent from earlier still hung subtly in the air, blending with the warm aroma of fresh coffee she had brewed. My mind replayed the pressure of her shoulder against mine at the table, solid yet yielding, and the way her hair had grazed my arm like the softest unintended caress. These accumulating moments layered tension upon tension until the space between us felt dense enough to taste on the tongue. She turned then, catching sight of me, and her gaze held mine for a beat longer than ordinary conversation required. "Need something?" she asked, her voice light on the surface but threaded with an undercurrent I couldn't quite decipher. I shook my head, yet my body carried me closer anyway, the pull between us growing impossible to deny. The rest of the evening unfolded in that same charged quiet, every ordinary action humming with layers we hadn't named. We sat across from each other at dinner, but the table seemed smaller than usual, our familiar conversation punctuated by pauses that vibrated with everything unsaid. Each time she passed the Saltor, our fingers nearly met reaching for the same napkin. That sharp electricity flared again, warm and insistent. I didn't withdraw. Couldn't bring myself to. Her laughter at one of my small stories sounded richer tonight, warmer, as if it carried depths I was only beginning to perceive. Through it all, the internal battle continued raging unchecked. This path might unravel the careful fabric of our shared years, or perhaps it was the single thread capable of stitching us back together more closely than before. I excused myself earlier than usual, murmuring something about tiredness, but the truth was I needed to escape the mounting hunger before it became too visible in my eyes or the way my hands lingered near hers. Later that night, lying beside her in the darkened bedroom with the lights long extinguished, I remained wide awake, every muscle tense with awareness of the inches separating our bodies in the bed we had shared for so many seasons. Her breathing gradually deepened into the even rhythm of sleep, soft and trusting. The fragments of her texts replayed endlessly in my thoughts, her quiet longing, the secret ways she had reached for relief while imagining my gaze upon her differently. Guilt and craving twisted together so tightly I could no longer separate one from the other. She shifted slightly beneath the covers, her hand moving near mine without quite making contact. The nearness of that almost touch sent a fresh wave of heat flooding through my veins, leaving me breathless in the stillness. I turned onto my side, staring up at the shadowed ceiling, my pulse still racing with the certainty that these accelerating loops showed no sign of slowing. If anything, they were gaining momentum, drawing me inexorably back toward her with a force I was growing less and less certain I wanted to resist. Morning brought no easing of the tension. I caught myself watching her more openly as she moved through the house, noticing details I had allowed to fade into background over the years: the gentle way she tucked stray hair behind her ear when lost in thought, the soft curve of her smile when she believed herself unabusted. The rationalization strengthened hour by hour. She wants this hunger to be truly seen and met. Continuing to pretend ignorance would only deepen the quiet crack we had both learned to live with. Yet the shame remained, a persistent metallic echo reminding me of the trustworthy foundation our life had rested upon. I couldn't determine which inner voice spoke louder, the one pleading for caution to protect what we had built, or the one suggesting that surrender might be the only genuine way forward. By afternoon, the pull had become too strong to ignore, leading me to offer help with another small task under the guise of being useful. We found ourselves close once more, shoulders nearly aligned, our breaths mingling in the limited space we shared. The vanilla scent enveloped me again, her body warmth seeping through the thin layers of fabric where our arms met. I held perfectly still, allowing the tension to gather like distant thunder on the horizon. Her eyes flicked toward mine, holding a silent question she didn't voice, yet she didn't pull away either. The air between us crackled with possibility, with the weight of the almost, the deepening craving, and the relentless war inside my chest that refused to quiet. And somewhere deeper, beneath the guilt and the fear, I understood I would chase the next moment, the next fleeting brush of skin, the next echo of her hidden desire, even as the familiar ground beneath our feet felt increasingly ready to shift beneath us. The conflict followed me into every quiet corner of the day, whispering warnings even as her presence called me back. I tried to focus on ordinary things, the mail, a phone call, the rhythm of chores, but my thoughts kept circling her, the way her shoulder had felt solid and warm against mine, the subtle vanilla that now seemed to carry new meaning. She moved through the house with her usual grace, unaware or perhaps beginning to sense the change in the air between us. Every shared glance lingered a fraction longer, every accidental proximity sent fresh sparks racing beneath my skin. The rational voice inside tried one last time to assert control, reminding me of the safe life we had cultivated, the routines that had sheltered us. Kept rising like a tide I couldn't hold back. Helping her feel desired again, helping us both awaken to what had been simmering unnoticed, began to feel less like risk and more like necessity. I stood at the edge of the living room later, watching her adjust a pillow on the couch, the simple motion somehow charged with everything building between us. My heart hammered with the knowledge that the next loop was already forming, pulling us closer still, and I no longer knew if I possessed the strength to step away before it tightened beyond return. I watched her across the living room that Saturday evening, the project wind still glowing in her cheeks like leftover sunset. We opened the wine to market, just the two of us, no kids, no plans, two glasses in and the room softened around the edges. The heater hummed low. She laughed at something small on the radio, kicked off her slippers and curled her legs beneath her on the couch, Her bare foot found my thigh, warm skin pressing through my jeans. The old song drifted in, the one we danced to on our honeymoon, slow and aching. She swayed a little where she sat, eyes half closed, humming under her breath. My hand moved without asking, resting on her knee first, then sliding higher, fingers tracing the hem of her shirt where it had ridden up. The fabric felt thin, almost nothing between us. Proximity had become unbearable, like standing too close to an open flame and pretending the heat wasn't crawling up my spine. She didn't pull away. Instead, her toes flexed against my leg, a tiny restless movement that sent electricity straight through me. I forgot how to breathe normally. The wine made everything warmer, heavier. Her scent, that faint vanilla mixed with something sweeter from the glass, wrapped around my thoughts until nothing else existed. The glass slipped from her fingers then, tumbling onto the carpet with a soft thud, red liquid bleeding into the fibers. Neither of us reached for it. I pulled her into my lap right there, slow enough that she could have stopped me, fast enough that she didn't. Her body settled against mine, vanilla hair brushing my face, the soft cotton of her shirt bunching under my palms as I held her close. She was trembling, or maybe I was. Her lips found my ear, voice shaking with the exact words I'd read in those secret texts, whispered now like a confession she could no longer keep inside. Every line we had drawn over 12 quiet years, the careful distance, the polite routines, dissolved in that moment. Desperate, hungry, no holding back. The almost S that had haunted me for days finally gave way. The ordinary burned away, leaving only the raw pull between us, the gravity that had been waiting beneath the surface all along. We crossed every boundary on that couch, the wine forgotten, the song still playing low in the background like a witness that wouldn't look away. Her breath came in short, uneven waves against my neck. My hands moved with a certainty I didn't know I still possessed, learning her again as if it were the first time and the last. The ache that had built in silence finally met its match. Surrender tasted like salt and wine and the faint tremble in her voice when she said my name like a prayer and a plea at once. Afterward we laid angled there, breathing hard, her head resting on my chest where my heart still hammered like it wanted to escape. The room felt different now, smaller, charged with everything we'd unleashed. She looked up at me with wet eyes, lashes clinging together, vulnerability raw in the soft lamplight. "I thought you'd never see me like that again," she whispered, voice cracking on the last word. I kissed her forehead, lingering there, tasting the salt of her skin. "I see you now, every single word." The new status quo settled over us like a blanket still warm from the fire. Our marriage was no longer the quiet routine we'd grown comfortable in. It had become something living, a shared flame we both fed with glances and touches and the knowledge of what simmered beneath. I told myself I'd never miss her burning desire again, that from now on I'd catch every spark before it faded unnoticed. Yet even as we lay there, limbs heavy and satisfied, a different take began to bloom in my chest, the kind that doesn't fade with release, because seeing her like that, truly seeing the hunger she'd hidden, meant admitting how long I'd looked away. How many nights I'd let the distance grow without noticing the cost. Her body against mine felt both home and foreign now, a reminder of what we'd almost lost and what we'd risked to reclaim. She traced a slow circle on my chest with one fingertip, breath steadying, but her eyes held a shadow I couldn't quite name. "What happens on Monday?" she asked softly, the question hanging between us like smoke. "When the routines come back, will you still look at me this way?" I didn't have an answer that felt solid enough. The fire we'd ignited felt real, alive, but I could already sense the edges cooling, the world outside waiting to press in with its ordinary demands. Would the text stop now, or would she still need to pour that secret yearning somewhere when the days grew long and familiar again? Would I still chase the almost moments, or would comfort pull us back into the safe patterns we'd known for so long? We fell asleep there on the couch eventually, tangled and close, but my dreams carried fragments of her whispered words mixed with the old quiet fears. Morning light would come soon enough, bringing coffee and schedules and the careful dance of everyday life. I held her a little tighter as sleep pulled at me, breathing in that vanilla scent now laced with the memory of wine and surrender. Part of me wondered if this was the beginning of something deeper, or simply a momentary blaze that would leave us both singed and searching for warmth in the ashes afterward. What if the hunger returned to the shadows, waiting for the next bottle of wine, the next old song, the next slip of a glass onto the carpet? What if we fed the fire every day like we promised ourselves in that tangled moment, only to discover that some flames burn brightest precisely because they were almost extinguished? She stirred against me once, murmuring something too soft to catch, and I pressed my lips to her hair, silent. I'll never miss her burning desire again. But in the quiet hours that followed, I couldn't shake the haunting sense that missing it had already changed us both in ways we were only beginning to understand. The fire was ours now, yet somewhere deep inside, I wondered how long we could keep feeding it before the ordinary world demanded its due, and whether the version of us that emerged from these flames would still recognize the life we'd left behind. The next morning the light came in soft and gray through the curtains, and I woke to the weight of her still curled against me. My arm had gone numb beneath her head, but I didn't move. The couch cushions had left creases on our skin, faint red lines that marked where we'd pressed together through the night. She shifted, her breath warm against my collarbone, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. The air smelled of spilled wine and vanilla and the faint salt of yesterday's surrender. My chest felt tight, not from the closeness, but from the quiet knowledge that something irreversible had happened here, eyes searching mine with that same wet vulnerability from the night before. Her hair was tangled, one strand stuck to her cheek, and I brushed it away with fingers that still remembered the feel of her shirt bunching under them. "Good morning," she said, voice husky from sleep and from everything else. It wasn't just a greeting. It carried the echo of those whispered words, the ones that had cracked open the careful shell we'd built around our marriage. I answered with a kiss to her temple, letting my lips linger until I felt her pulse quicken beneath the skin. Morning, the word felt small against the weight of what we'd done. My hand found her back, sliding under the hem of her shirt again, not with the desperate hunger of last night, but with a slower, more deliberate touch. Remembering, the fabric was wrinkled now, carrying the memory of how it had ridden up when I pulled her close. She didn't stop me. Instead, she pressed closer, her bare foot sliding along my calf under the thin blanket we'd pulled over ourselves at some point in the night. The rational voice in my head tried to speak, reminding me of coffee waiting in the kitchen, of the laundry that needed folding, of the Monday that loomed with its meetings and emails, but the pull was stronger. Her skin was warm, slightly damp from sleep, and the way she breathed against me made the room feel warmer than it had any right to be. I traced the line of her spine with my fingertips, slow circles that mirrored the ones she'd drawn on my chest hours earlier. Every small movement sent fresh sparks racing beneath my skin, a reminder that the fire hadn't died with the dawn. It had only banked, waiting for the slightest breath to flare again. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, though the clock on the wall ticked past 9. Her fingers played with the collar of my shirt, occasionally dipping lower to brush the skin at my neck. Each touch was tentative yet charged, as if we were both afraid that moving too quickly would break whatever fragile new thing we'd created. "I meant what I said last night," she murmured eventually, her voice barely above a whisper. "I really thought you'd stopped seeing me that way." "The way I still see you." Her words landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the quiet ache in my chest. I pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, the proximity making it impossible to hide anything. "I see you," I said again, but this time the words carried the full weight of my own shame. How long had I let the days blur into routines without noticing the hunger building behind her careful smiles? How many evenings had I come home, dropped my keys, and settled into the couch without realizing she was waiting for something more than the usual quiet companionship? She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. There was a shadow there, a lingering uncertainty that mirrored my own. Her hand stilled on my chest, palm flat over my heart, as if measuring whether it still beat for her in the same way. The vanilla scent of her hair mixed with the faint trace of wine on her breath, creating an intimacy that felt both comforting and dangerous. I wanted to promise her everything in that moment. That I'd never look away again, that our marriage would burn brighter than the safe, comfortable life we'd known. But promises felt too neat, too easy after 12 years of letting things fade unnoticed. Instead, I kissed her properly then, slow and deep, letting the almost moments of the past days dissolve into something real. Her body responded with a soft sigh against my mouth, her fingers tightening in my shirt. The couch creaked beneath us as we shifted, limbs tangling once more in the daylight. It wasn't the desperate crossing of boundaries from the night before, but something quieter, more deliberate, a reaffirmation. A claiming. Her breath hitched when my hand found the curve of her waist, holding her steady as the world outside the living room windows continued its indifferent turning. When we finally pulled apart, the room felt heavier, the air thicker with unspoken questions. She rested her forehead against mine, eyes closed, and I could feel the faint tremble in her frame. "This changes everything," she said softly, not as a statement but as a quiet fear laid bare. "And nothing at all." I nodded, though she couldn't see it, my thumb tracing lazy patterns on her hip through the cotton. The new status quo had locked into place, yes. Our marriage no longer just quiet routine, but a shared, living fire we both fed. Yet even in the afterglow, the ache persisted. The bittersweet acceptance that seeing her desire had cracked open doors we might never fully close. What if the hunger she'd poured into those texts found its way back to the shadows when the wine was gone and the old song faded from the radio? What if Monday's routines pressed in so hard that the sparks became harder to catch, requiring more than glances and touches to keep them alive? She shifted off my lap eventually, standing on unsteady legs to retrieve the forgotten wine glass from the carpet. The red stain had dried into a faint mark, a small scar on the fibers that would remind us both every time we walked past. I watched her move, noticing again the gentle way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the soft curve of her smile when she glanced back at me. My heart twisted with a mix of tenderness and regret. We'd fed the fire, crossed the lines, but the cost lingered in the quiet spaces between our words. Later that afternoon we moved through the house together, performing the ordinary tasks with a new undercurrent of awareness. Folding laundry became charged with proximity, our shoulders brushing as we reached for the same shirt. Making lunch involved stolen glances across the counter, her foot finding mine under the table. Each small moment carried the echo of last night's surrender, yet none fully satisfied the deeper craving. The internal war hadn't ended, it had simply shifted. No longer between ignorance and awareness, but between the pull to keep feeding the flame and the fear that constant burning might consume the very foundation we'd rebuilt upon. As evening approached, we found ourselves back on the couch, not tangled this time but sitting close, her head on my shoulder as another old song played softly from the radio. The heater hummed its low lullaby. Her hand rested on my thigh, fingers tracing idle patterns that sent warmth spreading through me. I covered her hand with mine, holding it there, feeling the subtle pulse beneath her skin. "I don't want to go back to pretending," she said suddenly, voice trembling with the same raw honesty that hadn't done me the night before. "But I'm scared we'll forget how to want each other when life gets loud again." Her words hung in the air, a haunting question wrapped in vulnerability. I squeezed her hand, pulling it closer to my chest where my heart still carried the rhythm of our shared fire. The unresolved longing settled deep inside me, bittersweet and persistent. We'd rekindled something precious, something alive, but the ache of what we'd almost lost forever remained. The fear that desire, once truly seen, might still slip back into the shadows if we weren't careful. If we didn't keep choosing the almost moments every single day. She turned her face toward mine, eyes searching, and I met her halfway, our breaths mingling in the small space between us, lingering, full of the gravity that had pulled us here. Yet even as our lips met, I felt the quiet pull of tomorrow's routines waiting just beyond the door. The version of us that emerged from these flames carried new marks, new warmth, but also new uncertainties. In the end, the fire was ours to tend, but as I held her close, breathing in the vanilla and the faint trace of yesterday's wine, I couldn't escape the lingering sense that missing her burning desire had already reshaped us in ways neither of us could yet fully name. And somewhere in that bittersweet acceptance, a small, haunting voice whispered that perhaps the truest intimacy wasn't in the blaze itself, but in the constant, trembling choice to keep it from ever dying out again. What if the next time the glass slips we both pretend not to notice until it's too